Hey guys, welcome. This is our algebra review. I am going to go ahead and go through these 10 problems, so let's go ahead and get started. Solve by factoring. Now there's a couple ways we can factor. We can X factor, we can use GCF, we can use split the middle term, all that good stuff. So let's go ahead and get started. This one here, I don't have a third term, so I'm actually going to factor by GCF. So we'll use GCF on this guy. So I can take out a 5x, which leaves me with x minus 3 equals 0. So whenever you have something like this, where you have two things multiplying, this is when we use the zero product property. Zero product property. ZPP for short. So that means 5x equals 0. We just take each portion that's multiplying, we set it equal to 0. This is going to just be x equals 0, so that's one solution. And we're going to add the 3 over, and we get our two solutions, x equals 0 and 3. I can always just check to see if this is correct by plugging these two numbers back in and making sure it zeroes out. So if I plug in 0 for x, these both go to 0, 0 equals 0, and I can plug in 3 and check as well. Okay. Number 2, x squared minus 36. This is actually a difference of perfect squares, DOPS. And we can go ahead and get x minus 6 and x plus 6 equals 0. Again, we have two binomials, so set them equal to 0. And we're going to get x equals 6 and x equals negative 6 as my two answers. And again, I can plug those in and make sure they work. This next one, we're going to have to x factor 8 and 9. That's going to be 1 and 8. So we're going to get x plus 1 and x plus 8 equals 0. So solve for each of those. We get x plus 1 equals 0, x plus 8 equals 0. Subtract. We get x equals negative 1, and we get x equals negative 8. And the last one here, again, we can x factor. We get negative 15 and negative 2. And so the two numbers that multiply to negative 15 but add to negative 2, well, I know I'm going to have a positive and a negative answer. And so I'm thinking, let's see, 3 and 5. So 5 is going to be negative, 3 is going to be positive. So you get x plus 3 and x minus 5 equals 0, and then solve each one of those by setting them equal to 0 again. We're using the zero product property on all these problems. Subtract it, and we get negative 3. Add it, we get positive 5. Okay, when we solve by square roots, we want to go ahead and divide, or move everything away. So I'm going to go ahead and add the 49 over there, so we get 4x squared equals 49. And then what we can do is we can divide by 4. X squared equals 49 over 4. And then take the square root. The reason why I didn't actually divide 49 and 4 is because they don't go into each other. But I do know 49 and 4 are both perfect squares. So this is going to give me plus or minus 7 over 2. Remember, when we're solving for square roots, always bring out a positive and a negative. Okay? This one we're going to add the 50 over and divide by 2, but when I divide this by 2, I want to actually carry it through because I get 25, which again is a convenient number because I can take the square root of 25 and I get plus or minus 5. Again, don't forget the plus or minus. A lot of times these quadratic graphs are hitting at 5 and negative 5, so they're hitting at 2 spots. All right, complete the square. We're going to have to move this slightly over. And let's go ahead and solve. So we're going to do negative 12 divided by 2 squared. That's going to be negative 6 squared, which is positive 36. Add it to both sides. Okay, and then this, what times 36 adds to negative 12? That's going to be x minus 6 squared equals, that's going to add up to 43. Square root both sides, and we get x minus 6 equals plus or minus square root of 43. Always got to remember that plus or minus. And then we can add the 6 over, and we get 6 plus or minus the square root of 43. Over here, let's move the 21 over. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do the other. So this is going to be negative 20 divided by 2 squared, which is negative 10 squared, which is going to leave me with a positive 100. Okay, and then we can go ahead and x factor that. We get x minus 10. Those would be the two numbers that would work. Equals 121. Square root both sides. It's going to give me x negative 10 equals plus or minus 11. This one actually factors. So when we do this, we're going to actually get x equals 10 plus 11 and x equals 10 minus 11. And so our final answer is x equals 10 plus 11 is going to be 22. And 10 minus 11 is going to be negative 1. All right, our last two are the quadratic formula. Again, let's write it out. Negative boy couldn't decide if he wanted to go to the radical party. He didn't want a B squared, miss out on 4 awesome cactus. Things over at 2a. So I like to always label my A, B, and C. A is the first term, 2. B is the middle term, 3. And C is the last term. And so we're going to get negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 3 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 5 all over 2 times 2. So we get negative 3 plus or minus the square root. That's going to become 9. 4 times 2 times negative 5. I have to get out my calculator, make sure I don't make a mistake. 4 times 2 times 5. Well, that's a negative 4 and a negative 5, so that's going to become a positive 40. All over 4. So we get negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 49 over 4. And that's going to actually wind up with two answers. We're going to get negative 3 plus 7 over 4. And we're going to get negative 3 minus 7 over 4. And so this is going to become 4 over 4, or just 1. This is going to become negative 10 over 4, which reduces to negative 5 over 2. And those are my two solutions. This next one, we're going to subtract the 5 over first before we evaluate. And then we can get our A, B, and C values. 1, negative 3, negative 5. And so we're going to plug it in. Negative 3 is our B. Okay, so negative negative makes this a positive 3 plus or minus the square root. That becomes 9. 4 times 5 is 20, so that's going to become positive 20 all over 2. We get 3 plus or minus the square root of 29 over 2. 29 is not a perfect square, so we can actually leave this as our final answer. Don't divide 29 by 2, whatever you do. Okay? All right, there we go. We have all of that done. That's a lot of work. Make sure you guys do your quizzes and be prepared for the quiz. Ciao.